I'm John Cruz, professional bass angler.
Are you kidding me?
John Cruz already holding the biggest bass weighed in so far in this event, having a huge final day.
Right there, boys and girls.
I also own and am the president of Missile Baits. Working out is one of my passions off the water. My family is a huge part of everything I do, and they mean the world to me. Back when I was a kid, I grew up out in the country in Amelia County, Virginia. I mean, we didn't even have a stoplight in the whole county. And so there's a lot of farm ponds in that area. And of course, we had a farm pond right in the backyard. When I looked out my window, I could see this pond, and it was tiny. It was little. But every time I got up and I could look out my window, I'd see that pond and I'd want to go fishing. And once I got going fishing, I didn't care anything about the little brim. I didn't care anything about the bass. I just wanted to catch the bass. The brim, whatever. They're easy to catch. I wanted the big bass. I wanted that thing with the big mouth. I wanted that thing that when it bit, it was jumping, it was thrashing, it was a battle. That's all I thought about. And then I can remember vividly when I was probably in that 10-year-old range. I went out to that pond and I'd caught a number of fish, 14, 15 inch range, maybe 2 pounds. And then I caught this one that was a lot bigger than anything. Looking back on it, I'm thinking about it, maybe it was a 3.5 pounder. I don't think it was 4, but I thought it was the biggest bass in the entire state. I was so ecstatic to catch this big old mouth. I set the hook on that fish. I remember it was right in front of some big bulrushes, some cattails over there. I threw over in front of those cattails. That line took off towards the middle. I set the hook, just an old Texas rig worm. That fish jumped up and I thought it was Shamu, man. And that thing jumped and jumped, and then I finally got that fish in, and I'll never forget that. I could barely lift the fish, it was so heavy to me at the time. And I'll never forget that fish. And from then on, I just wanted to find more and more and more of those kind of bass. My dad even had some more property that had, it was perfect for having a pond. And he had the land cleared and built a bigger pond. And we stocked it with a lot of bass. And man, even up until this day, when I go back to my dad's place, I will go down to that pond and I will catch fish after fish after fish after fish, and the memories definitely flow in that area. But soon after I became a teenager, and I did what we called pond hopping. Man, I would go one pond to another. We would ask people, neighbors that we knew, could we fish in your pond? Could we fish in that pond? And I was, at the whole time, I'm reading Bassmaster magazine, picking up all these new techniques, reading about spinner baits, reading about topwater baits, reading about different ways to rig a Texas rig, different ways to Carolina rig, different ways to throw a floating worm. I didn't know what a floating worm was until I read Bassmaster magazine. All these tips and techniques I'm learning, and I'm going out there in these ponds and trying. So it didn't take too long, reading all these things. I had to put the money on the line. I had to go ahead and fish in a tournament. My first cousin Charles, he was about 15 years older than me at the time. It still talk to him fairly frequently. Charles and I fished a tournament at Smith Mountain Lake, and I was 15 and it was a team tournament, and we went out there, and I'll never forget, we caught 4 bass. The 4 bass was not the limit. The limit was, it was a 10 fish limit back in those days. That's how long ago it was. And we caught 4 bass, and we were very proud of those bass, and we brought those little rascals to the scales, and we weighed them, and I think those 4 bass weighed about 7.5 pounds, and the tournament got won with like 33 or 34 pounds. Man, there were some real serious stringers brought in, but at that point I was hooked. I was done. I loved it. I started meeting people, and that's one of the things I love about fishing tournaments, is that you meet a lot of great people in this sport, and you get to, a lot of these people I've become friends. A lot of them are acquaintances, but pretty much anybody on the pro level now I consider a good friend. But at that time, I was reading about Denny Brower. I was reading about Kevin Van Dam. I was reading about Zell Rowland. Those guys are my friends now. I mean, I can pick up the cell phone and call any of those guys, which to me is absolutely crazy, because those guys are still legends in my mind. They are just the absolute legends of the sport. I have fished with Larry Nixon. I've fished with, you name it just about, and I have fished with it. Mike Iaconelli is one of my great friends. He has won everything there is to win in bass fishing, one of the most accomplished anglers ever. And that is just amazing to me, to be able to have that kind of camaraderie with the guys that you're competing against, and those guys that are your good friends. So that's one of the things I love about this sport.
We got a fella coming in from Salem, Virginia. How about a big round of applause for John